All right, y'all. I want to welcome my esteemed guest for today's The Reecie Colbert Show. He is one of my favorite legal commentators. He has an iconic afro, but an even more iconic voice. And I am so thrilled at the last minute he agreed to fit me into his busy schedule. Please welcome Elie Mystal. Hey, Elie, how are you?
Hey Reecie, how are you? Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday. Yes, this week has been off the chain, hasn't it? Like, come on. As a legal person, there's so much going on. I know we're going to talk about Trump, but I'm just curious. Even with the Trump news, is there a bigger or a more interesting legal story that has developed this week that's like have you thinking like I don't know how this week can get any more epic?
Indeed, there is. During the week, a big ProPublica report came out about Justice Sunken Place, Clarence Thomas, showing that he has been taking various trips, vacations, yacht rides, at the from as gifts from a rich Republican donor named Harlan Crow. Can't make up that 1850s name. And that on these trips, not just Crow, but a lot of other Republican donors, Republican interests, Republican litigants have had access to Thomas at these resorts
Mm,
that he's been going to, and he's been doing this all without disclosing these as gifts on his financial documents as he is supposed to as a Supreme Court justice. It's a fairly large story about public corruption and
mm.
about corruption on the Supreme Court, that I hope more people are paying attention to. Now, Reecie, to be clear, I would not suggest, and I am not suggesting, that Clarence Thomas's votes on the Supreme Court are being bought by
Right.
these Republican donors. In fact, I believe that Clarence Thomas is crazy enough that he just says what he says for free. Like he just actually believes
Right.
the crap that comes out of his mouth. But the issue here is not that he is being bribed. The
Mm,
issue is that he has been given access to these large Republican interests in a way that makes him biased, right?
right.
Because the bottom line is Clarence Thomas ain't coming on my yacht, or I don't have a yacht, but he's not coming to my barbecue,
Right.
right? Clarence Thomas is not coming to my house so I can talk to him about the issues that are important to me. He's not talking to gun rights activists, like David Hogue or Frank Gutenberg. He's not talking to them,
Right.
right?
Right.
All of these other people who might well be willing to pay thousands of dollars for 5 minutes of Clarence Thomas's time. We're not allowed to pay for that
Right.
kind of access. Only wealthy Republican donors are allowed to pay for that kind of access. And that's where the corruption is. And that's what should, I believe, get Clarence Thomas in Syria, should really start calls again for Clarence Thomas to be removed from the bench. It
Now,
won't happen because
how do you actually go about that? And another question I want to ask you too is okay, so we've heard about failure to disclose and this, that, and the other. I know you're not the biggest Merrick Garland fan, Attorney General Merrick Garland fan. Does that fall under his jurisdiction in terms of the DOJ to kind of pick up an investigation on this? Or is this just more of a Chief Justice Roberts domain?
yeah, this is one thing that isn't Merrick Garland's fault. And the reason why
Okay.
it's not Merrick Garland's fault is because this shocks a lot of people, but there are no statutory ethical rules that apply to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
Okay, every other judge in every other courthouse all throughout the country has some kind of statutory requirement for, good ethical behavior. And if you violate those statutory requirements, you are violating the law and thus can be prosecuted as a lawbreaker, right? And that would
Right.
apply from anybody from the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, which is like the second highest court in the land, to a traffic court in Peoria. All of the other judges have ethical strictures that they have to follow. The Supreme Court has none. Congress
Wow.
has not passed a statutory ethical guideline for the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court justices treat ethics, and remember, they're all lifetime appointed.
Yeah.
So Supreme Court justices treat ethics as a whatever they feel like in the moment kind of thing. That's why Thomas and his, insurrectionist wife have been able to get away with this for so long. There are no laws that they are violating because there are no laws that apply to the Supreme Court justices. It's a sad state of affairs. I've written a lot in The Nation about this, about how we need Congress to pass an ethical guideline for the Supreme Court. So it's not like this latest instance of public corruption is a law-breaking offense by Clarence Thomas. It's a moral offense. It's an ethical offense, and you can be impeached by Congress for moral offenses, right? Like that's part of their charge. They could remove him through the process of impeachment for this kind of stuff, but they can't kind of criminally sue him because he violated no laws, because there are no laws.
That is fucking crazy. So basically, what I'm hearing is that the Supreme Court low-key is above the law when it comes to at least their conduct as a justice. That is really ass backwards, because you would think that they would be the main people that will be subjected to the laws, as they're the final say on it. But wow. So basically, when I say who gonna check him, boo, that stands. Who's gonna check him? Because obviously it's not his moral compass.
After, despite the allegations from Christine Blasey Ford about the alleged rape committed by Brett Kavanaugh, aside from the fact that Kavanaugh most likely lied repeatedly during his various confirmation hearings, even after all that, there were 83 ethics complaints lodged against Brett Kavanaugh when he was elevated to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And a judge who was overseeing those ethics complaints decided that all 83 ethics complaints had to be thrown out because there was no mechanism to hold a Supreme Court justice accountable for ethical violations absent congressional impeachment. There was nothing that the judge could do, and so he threw out 83 ethics complaints against Brett Kavanaugh. Wow. So yeah, the Supreme Court justices are above the law, and they always have been, and they've always acted like it. And at some point, we need Congress to get in the game. I know Congressman Hank Johnson, he has at various points tried to get some passion around an ethics reform bill for the Supreme Court. At this point, Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy, they're not on board for it.
Right.
So that's the world that we live in, but that's the world that we've always lived in.
That is true. That's always true. It's just one of the few times that a Black man gets to benefit from them's the rules or not the rules. They don't exist. Because usually they'll make up rules just to punish us. But he's a Black Republican, so I guess he can do whatever the hell he wants to do. Okay, let's switch tacks and talk about Trump. Now, I was of the school of never gonna happen. Don't matter what the hell he's guilty of. Nobody's gonna indict him. Yet we saw this week he was arrested. I mean, he wasn't put in handcuffs. He wasn't shackled like, Shawshank Redemption. But I did see a little bit of that bravado sap out of him. He wasn't throwing up the fist and waving like a clown when he came out after being fingerprinted. In terms of the case itself, I'm of the mindset, well, he's been charged with 30-something counts. They got to get him at least one of them. It's hard to beat 35 raps. I mean, look at the Murdaugh guy. He was charged with about 80 crimes. And he went down for the main one they started with him with. How do you assess the strength of this case? I know there have been articles, CNN is publishing why this is the good case, why this is the bad case. But I trust your opinion on this situation based on what you've seen so far. Is Trump going to get convicted or possibly plead?
Well, the way that I've described it is that this is the kind of speeding ticket of financial crimes.
Oh.
Right? He definitely did it. He definitely did it. But it's definitely a bit of a ticky-tack kind of charge. It's a ticky-tack charge because it's the easiest charge for Alvin Bragg to prove. When you say that he has 34 counts, it's not that he's been charged with 34 different crimes. It's that he's been charged with one crime 34 times because he did the thing 34 different times, 34 different either false entries, false invoices or bad checks that he wrote in furtherance of this scheme to, hide the hush money payments he made to actress Stormy Daniels, right? As financial crimes go, Alvin Bragg actually said it best. He said it's the bread and butter of his office.
Right.
And you can take that one of two ways. You can take it the way Alvin Bragg meant, that this is a simple crime, we do this all the time, Trump is not being treated special in any way. You can also take it kind of in the way that I'm taking it, which is falsifying business records, which is the actual crime. That's the crime they charge you for when they can't get you for any other real crime.
Right.
So that's where we are. What makes the case slightly complicated is that he was charged, these 34 times, 34 felony counts, as opposed to misdemeanor bookkeeping fraud.
Yeah.
To make a felony, it's kind of like you got to hit a bank shot, right? It's kind of like you're calling glass.
Right.
Because what he's trying to do is say that they are felonies because Trump covered up basically larger, more serious crimes and that's why he falsified the business records, right?
Got it.
And so that's when you get into all this stuff in the indictment, or really the statement of facts next to the indictment, about the conspiracy and David Pecker and the baby daddy and all the other scandalous stuff that he did. But you'll note, Bragg didn't charge him with all that stuff. He didn't charge him with conspiracy. He didn't charge him with campaign finance violations. He didn't charge him with tax evasion. He charged him with falsifying business records, saying that he falsified those records in order to cover up the tax evasion, the campaign finance fraud, and all the rest.
Yeah.
That's not a bad argument. I think Bragg has a strong case, and we know from Michael Cohen that Bragg has a lot of documents to support that. But this is going to be a situation, unlike almost every time else when we've talked about Trump and the law, where Trump has legitimate legal defenses, right? One of those defenses is going to be like, oh, I committed a campaign finance violation. Interesting that I've never been charged with campaign finance violations.
Yeah.
Right? And that gets us back to Merrick Garland, right? Oh, I've committed tax evasion. Interesting that the federal government hasn't charged me with tax evasion. How can you, Alvin Bragg, say that I was doing this to cover up a crime that I haven't been charged with? It's, that's a legitimate defense. Another legitimate defense that he has is that these charges are not too little, but they are too late. That the statute of limit, and I don't want to get too much into the legal weeds, but every crime has a statute of limitations, right? If you commit a crime, you have to be charged with that crime within a certain amount of time, or else the charges lapse, essentially, right? For Class E felonies in New York, which is what Trump has been charged with, the statute of limitations is 5 years. Trump committed these falsifying of business records in 2017. I'm no mathlete, but 2017 plus 5 years gets us to 2022.
Right.
We're in 2023. So how is Bragg spanning that year, right? Couple of arguments that Bragg has. He's going to say, we didn't find out about the tax evasion and all this kind of stuff until 2018 because Trump was directly obstructing the investigation into that, ordering Michael Cohen to lie and all that. Okay, that's an argument. Another argument is that, remember, this is all happening kind of during the COVID times, right? And so during COVID, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo suspended the statute of limitations for 228 days. Well, that was in 2020. But now if you add, if you had these crimes in 2017 and you add 228 days, does that get you to 2023? Does that get you to April 2020? I mean, it's like, these are the arguments. It's going to come down to like arguments about when the dates of the thing happen.
Right.
Versus when the charge, like, these are the kind of technical arguments that Trump is going to have at his disposal. What he shouldn't have at his disposal, I've talked about this before, but like, what I'm talking about are Trump's legitimate arguments.
Right.
Bragg is a criminal that should be prosecuted. It's not a legitimate argument.
No.
This is an unfair, I'm like a Christian being fed to the line. No, you're not.
He's like Tupac.
Right, you're not. Exactly. You ain't Jesus, you ain't Tupac, you're just being charged with a crime like a normal person.
Right.
So Trump has been making a lot of illegitimate arguments to defend himself from these charges, and those nobody should give any credence to.
Right.
He does, unfortunately, have some legitimate arguments. But Reece, you asked me for me to tell you what's gonna happen. What I believe is gonna happen, I'm saying it on your show. Hold the tape and bring me back to see if I'm right.
Okay.
What's gonna happen is that Trump is going to be convicted on some of these charges, and after he loses appeal after appeal after appeal, he will have to pay a fine. This is not a jail time offense. I know classy felonies, the top jail time is 5 years, but Trump is a 76 by the time he's convicted, a 77 or 78-year-old man with no prior convictions. We don't put people in jail for that. We give them probation and a fine.
And then, you also had Michael Cohen, who was released to serve out his sentence at home. So I wouldn't be surprised. Now, the last question I got for you. What do you think in terms of, let me rewind a little bit. I think when he announced that he was getting arrested, he normalized the idea of, okay, so we arrest presidents now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that he opened up that can of worms, whereas before there might have been a little bit more hesitation on the severity of it and the the solidness of the case. Do you think that with what's happening in Bragg, people like a Jack Smith or like a Fonnie Willis are going to say, all right, well, somebody is holding him criminally responsible, whether he goes to jail or not, whether he's convicted or not. So it's not as urgent that we convict him. Like, do you think that will make other people fall back? Or do you think that because he has essentially normalized it and Rome is not burning, that it's saying, okay, well, let's all go for it? Which side do you think?
Oh, I really hope it's the latter. I really hope that Bragg is first over the wall, and that's going to make it easier for Fannie Willis, for Letitia James, for all these other people to also get themselves over the wall. They've now arrested Trump. They've had him arraigned. They've had the whole spectacle. Guess what? MAGA didn't show up. Guess what? The country didn't burn. Guess what? There weren't riots, right? Like, guess what? It's not actually dangerous to the functioning of the country to hold a rich white man accountable. I know, that's like crazy talk to like the New York Times. But it turns out that holding rich white people accountable is not the end of democracy as we know it. You've heard, I'm sure, Reecie, you've heard people saying like, oh, well, now local prosecutors will go after the Bidens and go after other Democratic candidates. Man, I'm old enough to remember the Arkansas Project. I'm old enough to remember how they went from some kind of land deal in Arkansas about Hillary Clinton all the way up into Monica Lewinsky's closet. I know how Republicans operate. Ain't nothing going to change. Every Democratic person running for any kind of office already knows that Republican Oppo research would be out to get them.
Absolutely.
Barack Obama damn well knows that if he had paid off a porn star, he would not have been allowed to leave the White House without handcuffs. All right. So like, we already know how Republicans do us. Nothing's going to change about that. So what Bragg arresting Trump has shown, hopefully to right-wing media, is that holding white people accountable does not herald the end of American democracy, and I hope Fannie Willis takes that to heart in Georgia. Fannie Willis, to me, has always had the most serious crime that Trump committed. Well, not the most serious, the easiest to prove crime that Trump committed, because he's on tape doing it. Jack Smith, he's got this documents thing. He's making people like Mike Pence testify. Maybe that is something that, that's an actual espionage charge at the end of it. That would have real jail time. You still hope somebody's investigating the coup. That was a thing. So I do hope that this leads to a bunch of other people being like, all right, we did it. Nothing bad happened. Let's go again.
So no predictions, just hoping. We're gonna name it and claim it and put out good juju. But wait a minute, I heard you say white wing, as in it could be Democratic and Republican, or because I know that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. But I just wanted to clarify
that. There is a media industrial complex in this country that exists to support white supremacist causes. They don't all call themselves, they're not all the Daily Caller, they don't all call themselves or think of themselves as doing that. But what you see when you see Peter Baker and the New York Times, when you see Maggie Haberman in the New York Times, when you see, if I may say, Van Jones on CNN, what they're doing is supporting right-wing causes, whether or not they are consciously aware of it as they're doing it or not, that's their function, right?
Yeah.
You know, Van Jones is out there like, that's just a grandpa going to jail, and I'll just feel sad for. Are you kidding me? He wasn't even incarcerated, and he's feeling sad about the jail. Like, but that's how they do.
Yeah.
That's how they do. And you know, Trump is getting all of the benefit of that, as, of course, as we knew he would. But again, it's not. There aren't riots. There is not blood in the streets. This is not breaking America, and I hope that other prosecutors take that lesson to heart.
Absolutely. Well, that may be what the white wing media does, but on the Reecie Colbert Show, we keep it straight, no chase. And that's why I invited you on here. So, Elie, thank you so much for giving me the commentary and giving us the facts that I knew you would deliver. Tell folks how to follow you.
Thanks so much for having me. I am at Elie NYC, ELIE NYC on Twitter and Spoutable now because, you know, not just about the Dogecoin or whatever the hell Elmo is doing. And you can pick up my book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution, at fine booksellers everywhere and on Audible.
Yes, pick up that book, y'all, because we need to step away from the memes and the blogs to get our information from. We got real Black experts out there. So, Elie, again, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.